In a world where genetic perfection is the norm, the Jensen family made a bold choice to leave their children's DNA untouched. But was it the right decision? As their youngest son, Noah, begins to display extraordinary abilities that defy explanation, the Jensens find themselves hunted by powerful forces willing to do anything to control him. What secrets lie within Noah's unaltered DNA? Why are the corporations so desperate to get their hands on him? Can the Jensen family protect their son and themselves from a society that fears the natural and reveres the modified? In a future where humanity's very essence can be bought and sold, will the unaltered survive, or will they be forced to become what they've always resisted? Chapter 1. A World Transformed. The year 2045. In the quiet suburban neighborhood of Willowbrook, where every house looked like it had been plucked from a glossy architectural magazine, the Jensen household stood out in a way that was both subtle and striking. The lawns were green and perfectly manicured, with trees genetically modified to bloom in coordinated colors throughout the year. Children played in the streets, their laughter echoing with the sound of innocence, yet there was something different about them. Something unervingly perfect. The Jensens had always been the odd ones out, though not in a way that was immediately obvious. To the casual observer, John and Emily Jensen were a typical middle-class couple with 3 children, Lila, Sam, and Noah, living in a comfortable 2-story house with a white picket fence. But it was in their children's eyes, their smiles, and the way they moved that set them apart from their peers. They were unaltered, natural in a world where genetic modification had become the norm. John Jensen sat at the kitchen table, the morning light filtering through the curtains as he read the news on his tablet. The headlines were full of the usual: new advancements in genetic engineering, another breakthrough in biotech, the latest celebrity couple expecting their first designer baby. He sipped his coffee slowly, his thoughts far from the screen in front of him. Emily stood by the stove, flipping pancakes with practiced ease, though her mind was elsewhere as well. Her gaze flickered to the hallway, where the sounds of their children getting ready for school filled the house. She couldn't help but feel a pang of anxiety every time she thought about them out in the world, a world that was increasingly unkind to those who were different. "Do you think we've made the right choice, John?" Emily's voice was soft, but the question hung heavily in the air between them. It was a question she had asked before, but one that seemed to weigh more with each passing year. John looked up from his tablet, meeting her eyes. He knew what she was asking, and it was a question that gnawed him too, late at night when the house was quiet and the world outside felt more threatening than ever. "We did what we believed was right," he said, his voice steady. "Lila, Sam, and Noah, they're perfect the way they are." "But the world doesn't see it that way," Emily replied, turning back to the stove. "Everyone else has their children modified to be smarter, stronger, healthier. Sometimes I worry that we've set them up to fail." John rose from the table, moving to stand beside her. He placed a hand on her shoulder, gently turning her to face him. "We didn't want them to be perfect by someone else's standards. We wanted them to be who they were meant to be. Natural, unaltered. That's something no one can take away from them." Emily sighed, leaning into him. "I just worry about what it will mean for them, growing up in a world where they're different." "We'll protect them," John assured her. "We'll teach them to be proud of who they are, to stand up for themselves. They have something special, something no lab can create: free will." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of footsteps thundering down the stairs. Lila, the eldest at 14, burst into the kitchen with the energy of a girl who had not yet learned to temper her enthusiasm with the self-consciousness that would come with age. Her long, brown hair was still damp from the shower, and she wore her school uniform with a hint of rebellion: untucked shirt, mismatched socks. "Morning, Mum." "Morning, Dad," she greeted them, grabbing a pancake from the stack and stuffing it into her mouth as she rummaged through her backpack. "Lila, slow down," Emily chided gently. "You're going to choke." Lila grinned, her mouth full of pancake.
Can't.
I'm late for choir practice. Sam, the middle child, followed her into the kitchen with a more measured pace. At 11, he was already showing signs of the quiet introspection that would likely define his teenage years. He nodded a greeting to his parents, carefully placing his school books on the table before sitting down to eat. Morning, he mumbled, pouring syrup over his pancakes with a precision that belied his age. Morning, Sam, John replied, ruffling his son's hair as he passed by. Ready for your science quiz today? Sam nodded, his face a mask of calm. I studied all night. I think I'm ready.
Good.
Just remember, it's okay if you don't know all the answers, John reminded him. Doing your best is what matters. The last to enter the kitchen was Noah, the youngest at 7. He was the one who most reminded John of himself at that age. Curious, thoughtful, and with a spark of something more that neither of his parents could quite define. Noah's hair was a wild mess of curls, and he wore a determined expression as he carried a piece of paper in his small hands. Mom, Dad, look what I made, Noah announced, holding up the paper with a proud smile. Emily leaned down to look at the drawing, her eyebrows rising in surprise. It was a detailed sketch of a machine, complete with labeled parts and arrows indicating how it would work. What's this, Noah? It's a rocket, Noah explained eagerly. I designed it myself. It can go anywhere in space. John took the paper from his son, examining it closely. The drawing was complex, far beyond what a 7-year-old should be able to create. He exchanged a glance with Emily, who mirrored his concern. That's amazing, Noah, John said, keeping his voice light. You're very talented. Noah beamed with pride, oblivious to the undercurrent of worry in his parents' expressions. Thanks, Dad. Can I build it when I get home? Maybe one day, John replied, handing the paper back. But for now, it's time to get ready for school. As Noah skipped off to find his backpack, Emily turned to John, her voice low and tinged with unease. He's different, John. More different than even we realize. John nodded slowly. I know, but we'll protect him. Whatever it takes. Willowbrook's society. The Jensen family's choice to remain unaltered was unusual, but not unheard of. In Willowbrook, a town where technology had woven itself into every aspect of life, genetic modification was as routine as vaccinations. Parents could select everything from their child's eye color to their aptitude for mathematics, creating a generation of children who were, on paper, flawless. But beneath the surface of perfection, there were cracks. Whispers of children who didn't quite fit the mold despite their enhancements, of families who regretted their choices, of a growing unease with a world that seemed to be losing touch with what it meant to be human. The Jensens, however, had always valued something deeper. They believed in the inherent worth of every individual, in the beauty of imperfections, in the idea that who you were was more important than who you were engineered to be. It was this belief that had led them to reject the technology that was so readily available, choosing instead to let nature take its course with their children. And while their choice set them apart, it also made them a target. In a society that prized perfection, the unaltered were seen as flawed, inferior, and in some cases, even dangerous. John and Emily knew this, but they also knew that they had to stay true to their values, no matter the cost. The decision. It hadn't been an easy decision, and it was one they had agonized over for months before Lila was born. The pressure to conform was immense. Everyone around them was modifying their children, ensuring they would have every advantage in life. But John and Emily had seen the other side of it too, the anxiety, the constant need to upgrade, the fear that their child wouldn't measure up despite all the enhancements. In the end, they had chosen to trust in nature, to believe that their children would thrive not because of artificial improvements, but because of the love and guidance they would receive. It was a choice that had set them apart from their peers, and one that had brought both admiration and scorn. Now, with their children growing up in a world that increasingly valued the engineered over the natural, John and Emily couldn't help but wonder if they had made the right choice. They had given their children the gift of free will, of being who they were meant to be, but at what cost? The question lingered in the back of their minds, unspoken but ever-present, as they watched their children grow and navigate a world that was both familiar and alien to them. It was a world of incredible advancements, where technology had surpassed the wildest dreams of previous generations, but also a world that had lost something in the process, a sense of connection, of humanity, of what it truly meant to live a life that was your own. What would you do if you discovered someone close to you had a secret like Noah's? Would you protect them or seek help? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear how you would handle it. Chapter 2. The Awakening. The first signs. It started with small things that, at first, were easy to dismiss as quirks of a precocious child. Noah had always been a bright boy, but lately, his brightness seemed to take on a new intensity, like a light bulb suddenly flickering to full power. He asked questions that belied his age, questions about the nature of the universe, about time and space, about things that even adults struggled to grasp. One evening, as the family sat around the dinner table, Noah's curiosity turned to the night sky. "Dad, why do stars twinkle?" John looked up from his plate, caught off guard by the question. "Well, that's because of the Earth's atmosphere. The air bends the light from the stars, making them appear to twinkle." Noah frowned thoughtfully, his fork hovering over his plate. "But if you were in space, they wouldn't twinkle at all, right? You'd just see them as they are, like the sun." "That's right," John said, smiling at his son's inquisitiveness. "In space, the stars shine steadily." Noah nodded, satisfied with the answer. But there was a gleam in his eye that John couldn't quite place, something beyond mere curiosity, as if Noah were processing the information on a deeper level. It wasn't just his questions that were different. Noah's physical abilities began to show signs of unusual development as well. He could run faster than his classmates, his reflexes were sharper, and his coordination was nearly flawless. During recess, while other children stumbled and tripped, Noah moved with the grace of someone far older, his actions precise and calculated. But it wasn't until a seemingly ordinary day at school that Noah's differences became impossible to ignore. The incident. It was a crisp autumn day, the kind that made the air feel alive with possibility. The children of Willowbrook Elementary were outside for recess, their laughter echoing across the playground. Noah was playing tag with a group of classmates, his small legs pumping as he chased after Ethan, a boy from his class. The game was lighthearted, the children's shouts and giggles filling the air. But as Ethan darted toward the edge of the playground, something went wrong. His foot caught on a root, sending him sprawling toward the steep embankment that bordered the playground. The world seemed to slow as Ethan tumbled forward, his arms flailing in a desperate attempt to regain his balance. "No!" Noah shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. Without thinking, without hesitation, Noah moved. One moment, he was several feet away from Ethan, the next, he was there, his small hands grabbing Ethan's arm and pulling him back from the brink. It was as if Noah had covered the distance in the blink of an eye. Too fast, too precise for a child his age. The other children stopped in their tracks, their eyes wide with shock. Even the teachers, who had been monitoring the playground from a distance, were frozen in place, struggling to process what they had just witnessed. For a few long moments, there was only silence. Then, the whispers started, spreading through the group of children like wildfire. "Did you see that? How did he move so fast? Is he a superhero?" Noah, still holding Ethan's arm, looked around in confusion. He hadn't thought about what he was doing. He had just reacted, his body moving on instinct to save his friend. But now, with all eyes on him, He felt a strange mixture of pride and fear. Ethan, still shaken from the near fall, looked at Noah with a mixture of gratitude and awe. "Thanks, Noah. You saved me." Before Noah could respond, one of the teachers rushed over, her face pale. "Noah, Ethan, are you both okay?" "We're fine, Miss Parker," Noah replied, his voice steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through his veins. "Ms." Parker's eyes lingered on Noah, a flicker of something, concern, perhaps, crossing her face. "That was very brave of you, Noah. But how did you get to Ethan's so quickly?" Noah shrugged, suddenly feeling self-conscious. "I don't know. I just did." The teacher frowned, clearly unsettled by the answer. "Well, it's good that you're both safe. Why don't we all head inside now?" As the children filed back into the school, the whispers continued, a low hum of speculation that followed Noah like a shadow. He could feel their eyes on him, not with the usual friendliness, but with a curiosity that bordered on suspicion. The consequences. Word of the incident spread quickly, as such things often do in a small community. By the time Noah got home that afternoon, the story had already reached his parents. John and Emily sat him down at the kitchen table, their expressions a mix of worry and confusion. "Noah," Emily began gently, "we heard what happened at school today. Do you want to tell us about it?" Noah shifted in his seat, suddenly aware of the weight of their concern. "Ethan was going to fall, and I just got there in time. I didn't want him to get hurt." John leaned forward, his eyes searching his son's face. "But how did you get there so fast? Your teacher said it was like you appeared out of nowhere." "I don't know, Dad," Noah admitted, his voice small. "It just happened." John and Emily exchanged a glance, their unspoken fears reflected in each other's eyes. This was more than just a precocious child. It was something else, something that they couldn't explain. Emily reached out, taking Noah's hand in hers. "Noah, sweetie, have you ever felt like this before? Like you could do things that other kids can't?" Noah hesitated, his brow furrowing as he thought back. "Sometimes, when I'm playing games or solving puzzles, I feel like I know what's going to happen before it does. And sometimes, I feel like I can move faster than everyone else. But I didn't think it was anything special." John's stomach tightened at his son's words. This wasn't just about being smart or athletic. This was something more, something that set Noah apart in ways that could draw dangerous attention. "You haven't told anyone else about this, have you?" John asked, his tone serious. "No," Noah said, shaking his head. "I didn't think it was important." Emily squeezed Noah's hand, her voice soft but firm. "Noah, we want you to be careful. There are people out there who might not understand, who might want to use your abilities for the wrong reasons. We just want to keep you safe." Noah looked up at his parents, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and trust. "Okay, Mom. I won't tell anyone." John forced a smile, though his mind was racing with what this could mean for their family. "Good. Now, how about we have some dinner? We can talk more later if you want." As they moved to the dinner table, the atmosphere was heavy with unspoken fears. The Jensens had always known that raising unaltered children in a world of genetic modification would come with challenges, but they hadn't anticipated this. A son with abilities that defied logic, that set him apart in ways they were only beginning to understand. The school's response. The next day, Noah returned to school, but the atmosphere had changed. The whispers from his classmates were louder now, tinged with awe and something else, something that made Noah's skin prickle. Miss Parker, the teacher who had witnessed the incident, pulled him aside before class began. "Noah, can I talk to you for a minute?" she asked, her voice kind but firm. Noah nodded, following her to a quiet corner of the classroom. Miss Parker knelt down to his level, her expression serious. "Noah, about what happened yesterday. I want you to know that you're not in trouble, but I need to understand how you were able to get to Ethan so quickly. Did someone teach you how to do that?" Noah shook his head, feeling a knot form in his stomach. "No, Miss Parker. I just moved." Ms. Parker studied him for a moment, her brow furrowing. "Noah, have you ever felt different from the other kids? Like you can do things that they can't?" Noah hesitated, remembering his parents' warning.
"No, ma'am.
"I'm just like everyone else." Ms. Parker's frown deepened, but she didn't press the issue. "All right, Noah. If you ever want to talk about anything, you can always come to me, okay?" "Yes, ma'am," Noah replied, his voice barely above a whisper. As he returned to his seat, Noah couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, not just by his classmates, but by the adults around him as well. It was a feeling that would follow him in the days to come, as the incident continued to ripple through the small community of Willowbrook. John and Emily's dilemma. That evening, John and Emily sat in their living room, the remnants of dinner still on the table, untouched. The house was quiet, the children having been sent to bed early, but the silence was heavy with the weight of what they had learned. "We need to do something, John," Emily said, her voice trembling. "Noah's not like other kids. If the wrong people find out." "I know," John replied, running a hand through his hair. "But what can we do? We can't hide him away. He's our son. He deserves to have a normal life." "But he doesn't have a normal life," Emily insisted, her eyes filling with tears. "He's different, and we don't even know how or why. What if someone tries to take him from us?" John's jaw clenched as he fought to keep his emotions in check. "We'll protect him, Emily. We'll do whatever it takes. But we can't panic. We need to be smart about this." Emily wiped her eyes, nodding slowly. "We need to keep him safe. We need to find out what's happening to him." "Agreed," John said, his voice firm. "But we can't do this alone. We need to find someone who can help us, someone we can trust." Emily looked at him, her expression pleading. "But who, John? Who can we trust with something like this?" John didn't have an answer. All he knew was that their lives had changed irrevocably, and they were now on a path they hadn't chosen, one fraught with dangers they couldn't yet see. But no matter what lay ahead, they would face it together as a family. Chapter 3. The Corporate Interest. The First Contact. The following weeks were a blur of anxiety for the Jensen family. Noah continued attending school, but the incident that had sparked so much attention hung over them like a dark cloud. The whispers among parents and teachers had grown louder, and it wasn't long before the family received their first unwelcome visitor. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when the doorbell rang. John, who had taken the day off to catch up on some work at home, looked up from his laptop, his brow furrowing. He wasn't expecting anyone, and the sudden interruption sent a chill of unease down his spine. Emily, who had been folding laundry in the living room, met his eyes. Who could that be? John set his laptop aside and stood up. "I'll get it. Just stay here." He made his way to the front door, pausing for a moment to glance through the peephole. A tall man in a crisp, dark suit stood on the porch, holding a sleek briefcase in one hand. His expression was calm, professional, but there was something about his demeanor that set off alarm bells in John's mind. Taking a deep breath, John opened the door. "Can I help you?" The man smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Mr. Jensen, I presume?" "Yes," John replied cautiously. "Who are you?" "My name is Nathaniel Ward," the man said smoothly, extending a hand. "I represent a company called Gentech Solutions. We specialize in advanced genetic research and development." John didn't take the offered hand. Instead, he narrowed his eyes, his body tensing. "I'm not interested in whatever you're selling." Ward's smile remained fixed, unfazed by the cold reception. "I'm not here to sell anything, Mr. Jensen. I'm here to offer your family an opportunity." John felt a spike of fear in his chest, but he forced himself to remain calm. "What kind of opportunity?" Ward's gaze flickered toward the house, as if he could see through the walls. "It's come to our attention that your son, Noah, possesses certain, unique qualities. We believe these qualities could be of great interest to our research. We'd like to conduct a few simple tests, purely for research purposes. In return, we can offer your family substantial compensation. John's grip on the door tightened. My son isn't a lab rat. We're not interested. Ward's smile faltered slightly, and his tone grew more insistent. Mr. Jensen, I assure you, we're only interested in helping. Noah's abilities could be the key to advancements that could benefit all of humanity. Think of what he could achieve with the right guidance. Thank you for your concern, Mr. Ward, John said, his voice firm. But my son is not for sale. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do. Before Ward could respond, John closed the door with a sharp click. He leaned against it, his heart pounding as he heard Ward's footsteps retreat down the porch steps. When he turned around, Emily was standing in the hallway, her face pale. John, who was that? Someone we need to stay far away from, John replied, running a hand through his hair. He knew about Noah. They know, Emily's eyes widened in fear. What are we going to do? John shook his head, trying to clear his thoughts. We're going to protect our son, whatever it takes. But even as he said the words, John knew that they were up against forces far more powerful than they could have ever imagined. The pressure mounts. The days that followed were tense, filled with an undercurrent of dread that seemed to permeate every aspect of the Jensens' lives. John and Emily tried to maintain a sense of normalcy for the sake of their children, but it was clear that the situation was far from normal. The phone calls began shortly after Ward's visit. At first, they were polite, almost friendly, representatives from various companies offering assistance and guidance for Noah's future. But when John and Emily continued to refuse their offers, the tone of the calls grew colder, more insistent. We're only trying to help, one representative said during a particularly tense call. You have to understand that Noah's abilities are extraordinary. If you don't cooperate, you're putting him at risk. There are others who won't be as accommodating as we are. John hung up the phone, his hands shaking with anger. They were trying to scare him, to bully him into compliance, but he wouldn't let them. Not now, not ever. But the pressure wasn't just external. Within the walls of their home, the strain was beginning to take its toll. Emily had become increasingly withdrawn, her once vibrant personality overshadowed by constant worry. She barely slept, her mind racing with fears of what might happen if they couldn't protect Noah. Maybe we should just leave, Emily suggested one night as they lay in bed, the darkness pressing in around them. Pack up everything and go somewhere they can't find us. John turned to face her, his heart aching at the sight of her tear-streaked face. And where would we go? They'll find us no matter where we run. And what kind of life would that be for the kids? Always looking over their shoulders, never feeling safe. Emily's voice cracked as she spoke. I just don't know what to do, John. I'm scared. I am too, John admitted, pulling her close. But we can't run from this. We have to stand our ground. We have to protect our family. As they clung to each other in the dark, both of them knew that the battle they were fighting was far from over. The real fight had only just begun. The betrayal. It wasn't long before the Jensens realized that the danger wasn't just coming from outside their home. It was much closer than they had ever suspected. One evening, as John was going through the day's mail, he noticed an envelope addressed to him with no return address. The handwriting was familiar, though he couldn't quite place it. Frowning, he opened the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper. The note was short, written in a hurried scrawl. Meet me at the old gas station on Route 19 at midnight. Don't tell anyone. It's about Noah. John's heart skipped a beat as he read the note. The old gas station was a few miles out of town, long abandoned and overgrown with weeds. He had driven past it countless times, never giving it a second thought. But now it seemed like a lifeline, a chance to find out who was behind the threats and what they wanted with his son. When midnight came, John drove out to the gas station, his mind racing with questions. The moon was full, casting an eerie glow over the cracked pavement and rusted gas pumps. He parked his car behind the building and stepped out into the cool night air, his breath visible in the chill. As he approached the front of the gas station, a figure emerged from the shadows. John's breath caught in his throat as he recognized the man, a neighbor, someone they had known for years. "Frank," John whispered, disbelief coloring his voice. "What the hell is going on?" Frank looked around nervously, his eyes darting from side to side as if he expected someone to be watching. "I'm sorry, John," he muttered. "I didn't want to do it, but they made me." John felt a surge of anger and betrayal. "Made you do what? What are you talking about?" "They came to me a few weeks ago," Frank explained, his voice shaking. "Offer me money, more than I've ever seen in my life, to keep an eye on you and report back on anything unusual." "I didn't know what to do, John. I've got a family too." "I couldn't say no." John's fists clenched at his sides, rage boiling just beneath the surface. "So you've been spying on us?" "Feeding them information about my son." Frank hung his head, shame written all over his face. "I didn't want to, but they said they'd hurt my family if I didn't cooperate." "They're dangerous, John. You have no idea what they're capable of." John stepped closer, his voice low and threatening. "You're damn right they're dangerous. And now, thanks to you, my family is in even more danger." "I'm sorry," Frank repeated, his voice cracking. "But I couldn't let them hurt my wife and kids." "Please, John, you have to understand." John's heart pounded in his chest, torn between fury and the need to protect his family. He wanted to lash out, to make Frank pay for his betrayal, but deep down, he knew that anger wouldn't solve anything. They were all caught in a web far beyond their control. After a long moment, John took a step back, his fists unclenching. "You need to stay away from us, Frank. If I ever see you near my family again, you'll regret it." Frank nodded miserably, tears welling in his eyes. "I'm so sorry, John. I never wanted this to happen." John turned away, not trusting himself to say anything more. He got back in his car and drove home, his mind racing with the implications of Frank's betrayal. As he pulled into the driveway, he sat in the car for a long time, staring at the house where his family slept peacefully, unaware of the dangers closing in around them. He knew then that they were running out of time. The corporations were closing in, and the Jensens were more isolated than ever. Chapter 4. On the Run. The decision to flee. The house felt different now, haunted by the knowledge that they were no longer safe, even within their own walls. After John's confrontation with Frank, the Jensens knew it was only a matter of time before the corporations made their move. The fear had become a tangible presence, lurking in every corner, weighing down every conversation. One evening, after the children had gone to bed, John and Emily sat together at the kitchen table, their faces etched with worry. The silence between them was heavy, filled with the unspoken fear that had been building for weeks. Emily was the first to break the silence. "John, we can't stay here anymore. It's not safe." John nodded, his jaw tight. "I know, but where do we go? How do we run from something like this?" Emily's voice trembled as she spoke. "I don't know, but we have to try. We can't let them take Noah. We can't let them turn him into some kind of experiment." John reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "You're right. We have to leave. But it won't be easy. We'll have to leave everything behind. Our home, our jobs, our lives. Are you ready for that?" Emily met his gaze, her eyes filled with determination. "I'm ready for anything if it means keeping our children safe." They spent the rest of the night planning, mapping out a route that would take them far from Willowbrook, far from the prying eyes of the corporations. They packed only the essentials, clothes, food, a few personal items, and made arrangements to withdraw as much cash as they could without raising suspicion. By the time the sun began to rise, they were ready. The children, still groggy from sleep, didn't fully understand what was happening. Lila, who was old enough to sense the tension, asked no questions, her expression serious as she helped pack the car. Sam was quiet, his usual calm demeanor replaced with a nervous energy. Noah, though confused, seemed to understand that this was important, that their lives were about to change. As they drove away from the only home they had ever known, the Jensens felt a mixture of fear and resolve. They didn't know what lay ahead, but they knew they had no choice but to face it together. Life on the run. The first few days on the run were a blur of backroads and small towns, each one blending into the next as the Jensens tried to stay ahead of their pursuers. They avoided major highways, using old maps to navigate through rural areas where they were less likely to be recognized. John drove for hours at a time, stopping only for gas and food, while Emily kept a watchful eye on the children, trying to keep their spirits up. The tension in the car was palpable, an unspoken understanding that they were being hunted. Every time a car appeared in the rearview mirror, John's grip on the steering wheel tightened, his eyes flicking nervously to the side mirrors. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being followed, that at any moment, someone would come for them. But it wasn't just the threat of capture that weighed on them. As the days turned into weeks, the reality of their situation began to sink in. They were living out of a suitcase, sleeping in cheap motels with flickering lights and musty carpets, eating fast food that left them feeling sick and unsatisfied. The children, who had been resilient at first, were beginning to wear down. Lila missed her friends, Sam was withdrawn, and Noah, though he tried to stay upbeat, was beginning to feel the strain of being constantly on the move. One night, after they had checked into yet another dingy motel, John sat on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. "We can't keep doing this, Em. The kids are exhausted, and so are we. We need to find a place where we can stay for more than a night." Emily, who was tucking Noah into bed, looked over at her husband, her heart aching at the sight of his weariness. "I know, John, but where can we go? They're looking for us everywhere." John sighed, rubbing his temples. "We need to find somewhere off the grid. A place where they won't think to look for us." Emily thought for a moment, then her eyes lit up with an idea. "What about the cabin?" John looked up, surprised. "The cabin?" "Yes," Emily said, her voice gaining strength. "Your uncle's old hunting cabin in the mountains. It's remote and no one knows about it. We could lay low there until we figure out our next move." John considered this, nodding slowly. "That could work. It's not easy to get to, and there's no cell service. We could be safe there, at least for a while." With renewed determination, they made their plans. The next morning, they set out for the mountains, leaving behind the highways and diving deep into the wilderness. The drive was long and treacherous, the roads narrow and winding, but the further they got from civilization, the safer they felt. By the time they reached the cabin, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the forest. The cabin was small and rustic, hidden among the trees, with a thick layer of dust coating the windows and a porch that creaked under their weight. But it was secluded, and that was all that mattered. As they settled in, the Jensens felt a small measure of relief. For the first time in weeks, they could breathe without the constant fear of being discovered. The cabin was far from luxurious, but it was a safe haven, a place where they could regroup and figure out what to do next. Noah's powers grow. In the stillness of the mountains, Noah's abilities began to manifest in new and startling ways. At first, it was small things, his reflexes becoming even sharper, his intuition growing stronger. But as the days passed, the changes became more pronounced. One morning, while the family was gathering firewood, Noah suddenly stopped in his tracks, his eyes wide as he stared into the distance. "What is it, Noah?" John asked, noticing his son's strange behavior. Noah didn't answer right away, his gaze focused on something only he could see. "Someone's coming," he said finally, his voice calm but certain. "John," and Emily exchanged a worried glance. "What do you mean, Noah?" Emily asked gently. Noah looked at them, his expression serious. "I can feel it. Someone's coming, and they're close." John's heart skipped a beat. "Are you sure, Noah? How do you know?" Noah shrugged, as if the answer were obvious. "I just know." There was no time to question him further. Trusting Noah's instincts, they hurried back to the cabin, securing the doors and windows as best they could. John grabbed the old hunting rifle that his uncle had left behind, his hands shaking as he loaded it. Minutes passed like hours, the tension in the cabin so thick it was almost suffocating. John stood by the window, peering out into the trees, waiting for any sign of movement. And then, just as Noah had predicted, they came. A black SUV emerged from the forest, its headlights cutting through the twilight. The vehicle moved slowly, deliberately, as if searching for something or someone. John's breath caught in his throat as the SUV came to a stop just a few yards from the cabin. He could see the silhouettes of two men inside, their faces hidden in the shadows. John tightened his grip on the rifle, his mind racing. He didn't want to use it, but he knew he might have no choice. He had to protect his family. The men got out of the SUV, their movements slow and deliberate. They were dressed in black, with no visible insignia or identification, just like the kind of operatives the corporations would send. One of them carried a device that looked like some sort of scanner, and he began waving it in the air, as if searching for a signal. John's pulse quickened. He knew they couldn't hide forever. He had to act. But before he could make a move, something unexpected happened. Noah, who had been standing silently by the fireplace, suddenly closed his eyes, his face serene. A strange energy seemed to fill the room, making the hairs on John's arms stand on end. "Noah, what are you doing?" Emily whispered, her voice trembling. Noah didn't answer. He simply raised his hand, palm facing outward, as if pushing against an invisible force. Outside, the two men paused, exchanging confused glances. The scanner in the man's hand began to emit a high-pitched whine, growing louder and more erratic by the second. Then, with a flash of light, the scanner exploded, sending the men stumbling backward in shock. They looked around wildly, as if trying to understand what had just happened. One of them reached for a radio, but before he could speak, the SUV's engine roared to life, and the vehicle began to drive away, without anyone behind the wheel. John watched in stunned silence as the SUV sped off into the woods, the men chasing after it in a futile attempt to stop it. Within moments, they were gone, swallowed by the forest. When John turned back to Noah, his son was still standing by the fireplace, his eyes open now, but glazed over as if in a trance. "Noah," John whispered, afraid to break the spell. Noah blinked, his eyes clearing. "They're gone," he said simply, lowering his hand. Emily rushed to his side, pulling him into a tight embrace. "Noah, what did you do?" Noah looked up at her, his expression calm. "I made them go away." John set the rifle down, his hands trembling. He didn't know what to say. He didn't know how to process what had just happened. All he knew was that his son was capable of things far beyond anything he had ever imagined. Encounters with others. The incident with the men in the SUV shook the family to its core, but it also served as a stark reminder that they were not alone in the world. As word of Noah's abilities began to spread, the Jensens found themselves approached by others, people who had heard of their plight and wanted to help, or who had their own reasons for staying off the grid. One afternoon, while John was chopping wood behind the cabin, a stranger appeared at the edge of the clearing. He was an older man, with a weathered face and a deep scar running down the side of his cheek. He wore a heavy coat and carried a backpack, his posture relaxed but alert. John instinctively reached for the rifle, which was leaning against a nearby tree. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice steady despite the fear churning in his gut. The man raised his hands in a gesture of peace. "Easy there, friend. I'm not here to cause trouble. Name's Lucas. I heard about your boy, and I thought you might need some help." John narrowed his eyes, not lowering the rifle. How did you hear about us?" "Word gets around," Lucas said with a shrug. "Especially when it comes to folks like you. People talk. Sometimes they even listen." "What do you want?" John asked, his suspicion growing. "Like I said, I want to help," Lucas replied, his tone calm and measured. "There are others out there, families, individuals who've been running from the same people you are. We look out for each other. We could look out for you, too." John hesitated, weighing his options. They needed help, that much was clear. But could they trust this man? Could they afford to take the risk? "What's in it for you?" John asked, trying to gauge the man's motives. Lucas smiled faintly, his eyes hardening. "I've got my reasons. Let's just say I don't like seeing good people hunted down like animals. And I don't like what those corporations are doing to this world. Your boy, he could be the key to stopping them." John's breath caught at Lucas's words. Could Noah really be the key to stopping the corporations? And if so, what did that mean for their family? Before he could respond, Lucas added, "You don't have to decide right now. I'll be around. Just think about it." With that, the man turned and disappeared back into the woods, leaving John to grapple with the implications of what he had just heard. Later that evening, John told Emily about the encounter. She listened quietly, her face a mask of concern. "Do you think we can trust him?" she asked when he finished. John sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know, but we might not have a choice. We can't keep doing this on our own. And if what he says is true, if there are others out there like us, maybe we need to find them." Emily nodded, though she still looked uncertain. "But what does that mean for Noah? If he's really as important as Lucas says, won't that just make him more of a target?" John reached out and took her hand. "I don't know, Em, but we have to do something. We can't keep running forever." As they sat together in the dim light of the cabin, the weight of their situation pressed down on them, heavier than ever. The decision they faced was monumental, whether to continue running and hiding or to seek out others who might be able to help them fight back. The strain of secrecy. As the weeks passed, the strain of their situation began to take a toll on the entire family. Lila, who had always been strong-willed and independent, became more withdrawn, her usual spark dimmed by the constant fear and uncertainty. She missed her friends, her school, and the life she had known before they went on the run. One evening, after the younger children had gone to bed, Lila sat by the fire, staring into the flames with a distant look in her eyes. John, noticing her melancholy, sat down beside her. "Hey," he said softly, nudging her shoulder. "What's going on in that head of yours?" Lila didn't look at him, her gaze fixed on the fire. "I miss home, Dad. I miss my friends and school and everything. I know we had to leave, but it's hard. It's really hard." John's heart ached at her words. He had known this was difficult for the kids, but hearing it from Lila made it all the more real. "I know, sweetheart. I miss home too, but we had to leave to keep everyone safe." "I get that," Lila said, her voice small. "But when are we going to stop running? When are things going to go back to normal?" John wished he had an answer for her, but he knew he couldn't make promises he couldn't keep. "I don't know, Lila. But I promise you, we're doing everything we can to make sure we're all safe. And one day, things will get better." Lila finally turned to look at him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I just want to go home, Dad. I want things to be the way they were." John pulled her into a hug, holding her tightly as she began to cry. "I know, baby. I know. But we're in this together, okay? And as long as we're together, we'll be okay." As he held his daughter, John couldn't help but feel the weight of their situation more acutely than ever. The strain of keeping their family together, of protecting them from forces they couldn't fully understand, was overwhelming. But he knew he had to stay strong for Lila, for Sam, for Noah, and for Emily. Noah's powers were growing, the danger was closing in, and the decisions they made in the coming days would determine the fate of their family. But whatever happened, John was determined to keep his promise, to protect his family no matter what. A glimpse of hope. Despite the hardships they faced, there were moments of hope, glimmers of light in the darkness. Noah's abilities, though still a source of fear and uncertainty, also brought a sense of wonder to their lives. He was learning to control his powers, to harness them in ways that defied explanation. One afternoon, while the family was out gathering firewood, Noah suddenly stopped and crouched down beside a fallen log. "Dad, come look at this." John, who was a few feet away, set down the wood he was carrying and walked over to where Noah was kneeling. "What is it, buddy?" Noah pointed to a small, injured bird lying on the ground, its wing bent at an awkward angle. "It's hurt," Noah said, his voice filled with concern. "Can we help it?" John frowned, unsure of what to do. The bird's wing looked badly damaged, and he wasn't sure there was anything they could do for it. "I don't know, Noah. It looks pretty bad." But Noah didn't seem to hear him. Instead, he reached out with his small hand, gently cradling the bird in his palm. He closed his eyes, his face serene, and for a moment, the air around them seemed to hum with energy. John watched in astonishment as the bird's wings slowly straightened, the feathers aligning themselves as if by magic. Within seconds, the bird was whole again, its eyes bright and alert. Noah opened his eyes and smiled, holding the bird up for John to see. "It's okay now," he said simply. John was speechless, his mind struggling to comprehend what he had just witnessed. Noah had healed the bird. There was no other explanation. He had seen it with his own eyes. As Noah released the bird into the air, watching it fly off into the trees, John felt a swell of pride and fear. His son was capable of extraordinary things, things that could change the world if they ever became known. But with that power came great risk, and John knew they had to be more careful than ever. A new resolve. The encounter with Lucas and the realization of Noah's growing powers forced John and Emily to confront the reality of their situation. They could no longer simply run and hide. They had to make a stand, to take control of their destiny before it was taken from them. That night, after the children had gone to bed, John and Emily sat together by the fire, the weight of their decisions heavy on their shoulders. "We can't keep running," John said, breaking the silence. "We need to take control of this situation. We need to find out who we can trust and who's really behind all of this." Emily nodded, her expression resolute. "I agree. But how do we do that? We can't just waltz into a corporate headquarters and demand answers." "No, but we can start by reaching out to Lucas," John replied. "He seems to know more about what's going on than we do. Maybe he can help us connect with others who've been through this, who've fought back." Emily took a deep breath, her resolve firm. "Then that's what we'll do. We'll reach out to Lucas, and we'll start fighting back. We'll protect our family, John, no matter what it takes." John leaned over and kissed her, grateful for her strength and determination. "We'll get through this, together." As they sat by the fire, the flickering flames casting shadows on the walls, John and Emily knew that their journey was far from over. They had taken the first step by going on the run, but now it was time to take the next step, to fight back, to protect their family, and to ensure that Noah's abilities were never exploited by those who would use them for their own gain. They didn't know what the future held, but they knew one thing for certain. They would face it together as a family, and they would do whatever it took to keep each other safe. Chapter 5. The Final Stand. The Plan. The cold mountain air was sharp in John's lungs as he surveyed the clearing. The cabin, once a refuge, now felt more like a trap, a final stand against the forces that were closing in on them. The decision to fight back hadn't been easy, but there was no turning back now. The corporations were relentless, and if they didn't take action, it would only be a matter of time before Noah was taken from them. John turned to Emily, who stood beside him, her face set with determination. She had always been the heart of their family, and now she was their strength as well. Lucas, their mysterious ally, was with them too, along with a small group of others who had been drawn to their cause, people with their own reasons for fighting back against the corporate machine. They were a motley crew, a handful of people against a massive corporation, but they had something that the corporation didn't. Noah, are you ready for this? John asked, his voice low. Emily nodded, her eyes fierce. We have to be. This is our only chance. Lucas stepped forward, his scarred face grim. The strike team will be here within the hour. We have the element of surprise, but we'll need to move quickly. The longer we stay in one place, the more vulnerable we are. John glanced at Noah, who was standing a few feet away, his small hands clenched at his sides. The boy looked calm, but John could see the tension in his posture, the weight of what they were about to do pressing down on him. Noah, are you sure you're ready for this? John asked, his heart heavy with the knowledge that he was asking too much of his son. Noah turned to face him, his young face serious beyond his years. I'm ready, Dad. We can't let them win. John swallowed hard, pride and fear battling for dominance in his chest. Okay then, let's get ready. The assault. The hours leading up to the confrontation were a blur of preparations and last-minute adjustments. The plan was simple but risky. They would lure the corporation's strike team into a trap, using the rugged terrain to their advantage. Once the team was neutralized, they would move on the corporation's nearby outpost, where they believed the key to stopping the pursuit lay. As they took their positions, the tension in the air was palpable. John could feel his heart pounding in his chest, the adrenaline coursing through his veins. He checked his weapon one last time, glancing over at Emily, who was doing the same. She caught his eye and gave him a reassuring nod, her expression calm but focused. Lucas, who had taken point, signaled for silence as the distant hum of approaching vehicles reached their ears. The strike team was coming, just as they had expected. Stay low, Lucas whispered, his voice barely audible. Wait for my signal. The minutes stretched on as the sound of engines grew louder, the vehicles finally coming into view. The strike team was well equipped, their armored SUVs cutting through the forest like knives. John watched as they approached the clearing, his pulse quickening. Finally, the lead vehicle came to a halt, the others following suit. The strike team members emerged, clad in black tactical gear, their faces hidden behind visors. They moved with military precision, spreading out to secure the area. Lucas held up his hand, waiting until the team was fully committed to the clearing before giving the signal. With a sharp whistle, he brought his hand down, and all hell broke loose. John and the others opened fire, the crack of gunfire shattering the silence of the forest. The strike team reacted instantly, taking cover behind their vehicles and returning fire. The clearing erupted in chaos, the air thick with the sounds of battle. But the Jensens and their allies had the advantage of surprise and terrain. They moved swiftly and decisively, using the trees and rocks for cover, outmaneuvering the strike team at every turn. John could feel the fear in his gut, but he pushed it aside, focusing on the task at hand. Noah, who had been watching from a safe distance, suddenly stepped forward, his eyes narrowing in concentration. John's heart lurched as he saw his son raise his hand, but he knew better than to interfere. Noah had grown stronger, more confident in his abilities, and this was his moment to prove it. The ground beneath the strike team began to tremble, the earth shifting and cracking as Noah channeled his power. The vehicles, once sturdy and impenetrable, began to sink into the ground, trapped by the very land they had hoped to dominate. The strike team members scrambled to escape, their movements frantic as they realized they were being overpowered. John watched in awe as Noah's power surged, his son's face a mask of concentration. The strike team was retreating now, their confidence shattered by the boy they had come to capture. Within minutes, the battle was over, the team defeated, and their vehicles incapacitated. John rushed to Noah's side, his heart pounding with relief and pride. "Noah, you did it. You were amazing." Noah smiled, the tension in his face easing. "I just did what you taught me, Dad. I didn't give up." John pulled him into a tight hug, his emotions threatening to overwhelm him. "I'm so proud of you, son." But there was no time to rest. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. The outpost was their next target, and they had to move quickly before reinforcements arrived. The outpost. The outpost was located deep within the forest, a hidden facility that had served as the corporation's base of operations in the area. It was here that the Jensens hoped to find the information they needed to end the pursuit once and for all. As they approached the facility, John could feel the tension rising again. This was it, their final chance to strike back at the corporation and secure their freedom. Lucas took the lead, guiding them through the dense underbrush until the facility came into view. It was a nondescript building, camouflaged to blend in with its surroundings, but John could see the security measures in place: cameras, guards, and locked gates. "We'll need to move fast," Lucas whispered, his voice barely audible. "Once we're inside, it's only a matter of time before they call for backup." John nodded, his mind racing. The plan was simple. Lucas and a few others would create a diversion at the front gate, drawing the guards' attention, while John, Emily, and Noah would enter the facility through a side entrance. Once inside, they would locate the central control room and extract the data they needed. The diversion worked perfectly. As the guards rushed to respond to the commotion at the front gate, John led Emily and Noah to the side entrance. The door was locked, but Emily quickly disabled the security panel, allowing them to slip inside. The interior of the facility was cold and sterile, a stark contrast to the chaos outside. They moved quickly, following the map Lucas had provided, until they reached the control room. John could feel his pulse quicken as they approached the door, knowing that this was the moment that would decide their fate. Emily worked quickly to hack the control panel, her fingers flying over the keyboard. Within moments, the door slid open, revealing a room filled with monitors, servers, and data terminals. They had made it. Noah, who had been watching their backs, suddenly tensed. "Dad, someone's coming." John turned to see a figure approaching from down the hallway, a man in a suit, his expression cold and calculating. It was Nathaniel Ward, the man who had first come to their home, now standing between them and their freedom. "I'm impressed," Ward said, his voice calm. "You've made it further than I expected. But this ends here. Hand over the boy, and I might let the rest of you walk away." John stepped forward, placing himself between Ward and his family. "We're not giving you anything." Ward's eyes narrowed. "You're making a mistake. Noah belongs to us. You can't protect him forever." John's heart pounded in his chest, but he didn't waver. "You're wrong. Noah doesn't belong to anyone. He's our son, and we'll protect him with our lives." Ward's expression hardened, and he reached for a device on his belt, a small, sleek remote with a single button. "So be it," he said coldly. Before Ward could press the button, Noah stepped forward, his eyes blazing with determination. "You're not going to hurt my family," he said, his voice steady. Ward hesitated, clearly taken aback by the boy's defiance. "Noah, you don't understand what's at stake. Your abilities could change the world, make it a better place. But only if you come with us." Noah shook his head. "You don't care about making the world better. You just want to control it. But I won't let you." With a sudden burst of energy, Noah raised his hand, sending a shockwave of force toward Ward. The device in Ward's hand shattered, and the man was thrown backward, slamming into the wall with a thud. John rushed forward, grabbing Ward by the collar and pulling him up. "This is over," John said, his voice cold. "You lost." Ward glared at him, but there was fear in his eyes now. "You have no idea what you've done. There are others, people more powerful than me, who won't stop until they get what they want." John tightened his grip. "Then we'll be ready for them." With one final look of defiance, John released Ward, letting him slump to the ground. They didn't have time to deal with him now. The data was all that mattered. Emily had already begun extracting the information from the servers, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "I've got it," she said, her voice urgent. "We need to move, now." John nodded, and they quickly exited the control room, leaving Ward behind. As they made their way out of the facility, the sounds of approaching reinforcements filled the air. But they were too late. The Jensens had what they needed. They regrouped with Lucas and the others outside, the forest echoing with the sounds of distant sirens. "We need to get out of here," Lucas said urgently. "They'll be sending everything they've got after us." John nodded, his heart still pounding. "Let's move." They retreated into the forest, the weight of what they had accomplished hanging heavy in the air. They had struck a blow against the corporation, but they knew this was only the beginning. The data they had taken would expose the corporation's plans, but it would also make them even bigger targets. As they moved deeper into the wilderness, John glanced at Noah, who was walking beside him, his face calm but resolute. Despite everything, Noah had proven himself to be stronger than John could have ever imagined. He had faced down the corporation, protected his family, and stood up for what was right. And now, as they walked into the unknown, John knew that they would continue to fight together. The aftermath. The journey back to the cabin was long and arduous, but they made it without incident. Once they were safely inside, Emily immediately began analyzing the data they had extracted, hoping to find the key to ending the corporation's pursuit once and for all. As the night wore on, John and Lucas sat by the fire, discussing their next move. "This isn't over," Lucas said, his voice grim. "The corporation will be back, and they'll be even more determined to get what they want." "I know," John replied, his eyes fixed on the flames. "But we've bought ourselves some time. And with this data, we might finally have a way to fight back." Lucas nodded, but there was a heaviness in his gaze. "The fight won't be easy, John. But you've got something they don't, something they can't control." John glanced over at Noah, who was sleeping soundly on the couch, exhausted from the day's events. "I know, and I'll do whatever it takes to protect him." As they sat in silence, the weight of their journey settling over them, John couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. They had faced impossible odds and come out the other side stronger. They had fought for their family, for their freedom, and for the future. And as long as they were together, John knew they could face whatever came next. Chapter 6, Resolution. The calm after the storm. The cabin was quiet, the only sound the crackling of the fire as it cast a warm glow over the small living room. The battle was over, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, the Jensens could finally breathe. The weight of their fight against the corporation still hung heavy in the air, but the immediate threat had been neutralized. John sat by the fire, staring into the flames as his mind replayed the events of the past few days. He was exhausted, both physically and emotionally, but there was also a deep sense of relief. They had faced down the corporation and won. They had protected Noah, but the victory was bittersweet, knowing that their lives would never return to what they once were. Emily entered the room, her footsteps soft on the wooden floor. She carried a cup of tea, which she handed to John before sitting beside him. "How are you holding up?" she asked gently. John took a sip of the tea, savoring the warmth. "Tired," he admitted, "but I'm glad it's over, at least for now." Emily nodded, her gaze drifting to the window, where the first light of dawn was beginning to break. "It's not really over, though, is it? The corporation might be down, but they're not out." They'll come after us again. John reached out and took her hand, squeezing it gently. Maybe. But we're stronger now. We know what we're up against, and we know how to fight back. And we have allies. Emily leaned her head on his shoulder, taking comfort in his words. I just want our family to be safe, John. That's all I've ever wanted. We will be, John promised, though he knew it was a promise that might be difficult to keep. We'll find a way to make it work. We'll keep moving if we have to, but we'll stay together. Emily closed her eyes, letting out a deep sigh. As long as we're together, we'll be okay. A new beginning. In the days that followed the confrontation, the Jensens and their allies began to regroup and plan their next steps. The data they had extracted from the corporation's outpost was invaluable, containing detailed information on the corporation's operations, their plans for people like Noah, and the identities of those involved. Emily, who had taken on the task of analyzing the data, discovered that the corporation had been tracking not just Noah, but dozens of other children with unique abilities. These children were scattered across the country, hidden away by families who, like the Jensens, were trying to protect them from being exploited. This is bigger than we thought, Emily said one evening as she sat at the kitchen table, poring over the documents. They've been experimenting on these kids for years, trying to replicate their abilities. But none of the experiments have worked. They need someone like Noah, someone whose abilities are natural. John frowned as he looked over her shoulder at the files. So what do? We can't protect all these kids by ourselves. No, but we can warn their families, Emily replied. We can tell them what's going on, help them go underground like we did. And maybe if we all work together, we can stop the corporation from getting their hands on any of these kids. John nodded slowly, seeing the wisdom in her words. It won't be easy. The corporation will fight back, and they have resources we can't even imagine. I know, Emily said, her voice steady. But we have something they don't, each other. And we have Noah. At the mention of his name, Noah looked up from where he was sitting on the couch, a book in his lap. What about me? John smiled, crossing the room to kneel beside his son. You're special, Noah. You have a gift that could change the world. But that also means you're a target. We have to be careful, but we also have to be brave. There are other kids out there who need our help. Noah nodded solemnly, understanding the gravity of his father's words. I want to help them, Dad. I don't want anyone to be scared like we were. John's heart swelled with pride. And we will, son. We're going to make sure that no one else has to go through what we did. A temporary peace. With their immediate safety secured, the Jensens began to settle into a new routine. They knew they couldn't stay at the cabin forever, but for now, it was a safe haven where they could plan their next move. Lucas and the other allies had gone their separate ways, spreading the word to other families who were in hiding, but they remained in contact, ready to regroup if the need arose. Noah continued to explore his abilities, with John and Emily's guidance. He practiced controlling his powers, learning to use them in ways that would keep him and his family safe. The more he practiced, the stronger and more confident he became, though he never lost the humility that made him the kind, caring boy his parents loved. One afternoon, as Noah was practicing in the clearing behind the cabin, Emily watched from the porch, a sense of calm settling over her. It was a rare moment of peace, and she was grateful for it. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of fear and uncertainty, but now, for the first time in a long time, she felt a glimmer of hope. John joined her on the porch, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. He's getting stronger, he remarked, watching Noah as he manipulated a small stone with his mind, levitating it a few feet above the ground before gently lowering it back down. Emily nodded, leaning into him. He is. And he's learning to control it, to use it wisely. I'm so proud of him. John smiled, pressing a kiss to her temple. Me too. He's going to do great things, Emily. I just know it. Emily looked up at him, her eyes filled with love and gratitude. And we'll be there to see it, to help him every step of the way. As they stood together, watching their son, the future didn't seem as frightening as it once had. They had been through the worst and come out stronger on the other side. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they knew they could face them as a family. The next steps. Though the Jensens were safe for now, they knew their fight was far from over. The corporation had been dealt a serious blow, but they were still out there, still searching for Noah and others like him. John and Emily were under no illusions. They knew the corporation would regroup, that they would come after them again. But they also knew they had allies, and that gave them hope. One evening, as they sat around the dinner table, John broached a difficult subject. "We need to talk about what's next." Emily looked up from her plate, her expression serious. "You're right. We can't stay here forever. They'll find us eventually." John nodded. "I've been thinking, maybe it's time we stopped running. Maybe it's time we took the fight to them." Emily's eyes widened in surprise. "What do you mean?" "I mean, we've been on the defensive this whole time, reacting to what they do. But what if we went on the offensive? We've got the data, we've got allies. What if we used that to expose the corporation, to take them down once and for all?" Emily considered his words, her mind racing with the possibilities. "It's a huge risk, John. If we go public, we'll be painting a target on our backs, on Noah's back. Are you sure that's what we want?" John sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know, but I do know that we can't keep living in fear. We can't keep running. If we want a future for our kids, we have to fight for it." Noah, who had been listening quietly, suddenly spoke up. "I want to fight too. I want to help." John looked at his son, his heart swelling with pride. "And you will, Noah. But we have to be smart about this. We'll plan, we'll prepare, and when the time is right, we'll make our move." Emily reached across the table, taking John's hand. "Whatever we decide, we'll do it together. We'll protect our family, and we'll make sure Noah has a future." John squeezed her hand, grateful for her unwavering support. Together. The path forward. As the days turned into weeks, the Jensens continued to prepare for the challenges ahead. They reached out to their allies, sharing the data they had gathered and coordinating their efforts. They knew the fight would be long and difficult, but they were ready. Noah's abilities continued to grow, and with each new development, he became more confident in his role within the family. He understood the responsibility that came with his powers, and he was determined to use them for good. John and Emily did their best to guide him, to help him navigate the complexities of his abilities, but they also knew that Noah was on a journey of his own, a journey that would shape the future of their family and perhaps even the world. One evening, as the family gathered around the fire, Noah looked up at his parents, his young face serious. "I don't want to be scared anymore," he said quietly. "I want to help other kids like me so they don't have to be scared either." John's heart ached at the sincerity in his son's voice. "And you will, Noah. We'll make sure of it." Emily smiled, reaching out to stroke Noah's hair. "You're going to do great things, sweetie. And we'll be right here with you, every step of the way." As they sat together, the warmth of the fire enveloping them, the Jensens felt a sense of peace. The road ahead was uncertain, and the challenges they faced were immense, but they were united in their purpose. They had fought for their family, for their freedom, and they would continue to fight for the future they believed in. A new hope. The following morning, as the sun rose over the mountains, the Jensens prepared to leave the cabin. They packed their belongings, securing the data they had gathered and saying goodbye to the place that had been their refuge. The time had come to move on, to take the next step in their journey. As they stood on the porch, ready to leave, Noah looked out at the mountains, a sense of calm settling over him. He knew that this was just the beginning, that there were challenges ahead that he couldn't yet imagine. But he also knew that he wasn't alone. He had his family, and together they could face anything. "Are you ready?" John asked, placing a hand on Noah's shoulder. Noah nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "I'm ready." With that, the Jensens turned and walked away from the cabin, the morning light guiding their path. They didn't know where the road would lead them, but they were ready to face whatever came next. As they disappeared into the forest, the future stretched out before them. Uncertain, yes, but also filled with hope. The Jensens had fought for their family, for their freedom, and for the future. And whatever challenges lay ahead, they knew they would face them together. Thank you for joining the Jensen family on this journey. What do you think lies ahead for Noah and his family? Do you have any ideas or twists you'd love to see in a sequel? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'm excited to hear your ideas. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Your support means the world to me.